Hey guys, how's it going? You can probably tell from the image right here. I am working on a piece by DrRocker this week. Reached out to him on Instagram a few weeks ago and really liked something that he had done. Offered to ink it, and he suggested maybe I do a different piece, and we release them together on Instagram. Put that out on Instagram a couple of days ago, and I wanted to get this video together. This was a lot of fun for me. I I wasn't super familiar with the character. To be honest, it's not a game I had played at this point, but I knew who the character was. He's in pop culture enough. I've seen enough images of him. I knew who that was. But mainly, I wanted to do this because of some of the inking techniques. And I promise you, we get past this really bad angle eventually, and I am more on screen. I'm sorry about that. You'll notice about halfway through this video I buy a new mount for my phone to be able to record so that we're not doing this bad angle trying to figure out where my cue or my mark is. It's so bad. But I started doing this character or this drawing because I have always loved Dr. Rock's stuff, and his videos were really, when I was first starting to learn to ink on my iPad, his videos were really helpful to me in really just kind of knowing some of the things I could do with my layers and kind of how to set up my colors, and just there's a lot of really helpful things. Started following him on Instagram, really have been following his progress, and he's really moved into this totally different style that is just amazing to me, and it's very, I don't want to say inker friendly because it's a lot of work, but like it uses a lot of standard inking techniques, like the way he uses his hatching and these kind of like cross angles to achieve different effects. So I was really excited to get to this. This is with a my typical 102 Hunt crow quill. You'll notice I use a couple of different nib holders throughout this. I have a few kind of going at a time. Sometimes one will kind of get a little clumpy, and I don't want to bother getting it scraped off or cleaned before I get to move on to the next thing. So I just grab another one, and I'll let this one soak in some water for a few minutes and then scrape it all off. You may see this, you don't ever see this off camera, but I have a little knife over there that when the ink starts building up, I wipe it off from time to time, but you'll still get little buildups on the edges from time to time. And I say time to time way too much. Sorry about that. But yeah, it'll start getting little buildups, and it's easier to just scrape those off with a knife. I'll sometimes use a degreaser for that as well, and just leave the nib sitting in that for a little while. But this is the reason I keep a few different nibs going or pens going, is just so I have something to always be working with. Again, off camera here, that does change, and I apologize for that. But you'll notice just there's so many fine lines, and I didn't really want to ruin the hatching on this. There were not a lot of blacks to spot. In fact, I kind of had to create some because he creates every single value really with hatching. So I kind of selected some blacks really to kind of give some balance from the top to the bottom. Even every single spot had these tiny little beautifully done lines that I struggled with, to be honest, but they were fun. And to keep from getting frustrated with myself, I would take breaks. I'd go for 15, 20, 30 minutes, an hour maybe, take a little break, stand up, walk away from it, try and be as precise as I can. These videos are sped up because this is really hours worth of inking, and I don't even get to all of it. You'll see the finished product here at the end, but this is really only covering about a third, maybe a quarter of what I was doing and what I did. I spent several days on this. The thing for this piece in particular was that the lines are so specifically chosen that my interpretation really was more about adding a couple of small highlights in a few places and then trying to find my line weight in some of the shadows. Really, beyond that, it was really trying to stay as close to his line as possible. His line was very precise. One of the things I did want to try and do is kind of offer a little bit of a, I guess, more dynamic feel, so that when the inks popped, it felt more like this rough character, rough around the edges, and you can feel the texture of the leather and the. I really wanted that to kind of come across some. He seems to be and feels like, from what I have seen in the very little bit I've played of the game, which is maybe about 20 minutes, gruff, harsh. So I wanted the line to feel rough and harsh. That being said, I actually started this piece over. I had originally done it in blue line on some Strathmore paper, and I really started kind of shredding it when I was doing the tunic in one certain area, and it was just really frustrating me, and it wasn't worth it. And I'd only really put in about an hour, maybe 2 hours worth of work at that point. I was just like, you know what, it's not worth it. I'm doing this for, a pretty well-known artist online. I am doing this as an example of how I want my work to look, and or at least, in learning these techniques, how I want to do my best work. So I just printed it back out, and I made sure to print it out in red so I could see the lines better. And then I made sure to print it on better paper, which is something I'll talk about a little bit here in a second. But starting it over was the right choice, and sometimes you have to do that, and that's lame. But really, it was just because the paper was shredding, and I was starting to get kind of just blotchy, uneven lines in the tunic, and it was really frustrating me. So one of the things that I did do is I moved to Eon papers. I had never used Eon before. This is a first for me, and I probably do a review on this as well. But the thing I really liked was it's smooth without being slick. And while I did still get little bits of pulp and paper kind of in the nib from time to time, it was a much smaller scale, and it just didn't tear and shred up as easily. I really like this paper, and I will probably end up going back to it as far as like a paper for this type of use. My only problem with it is it's very bright white, so it's a little hard to use correction fluids on, but I think I managed to find a Uniball Jelly Roll pen that works pretty well with it. And then I also use the Dr. P.H. Martin's, it's not their, I think it's their pen white. Yeah, the pen white is what I use. It's really good stuff. All right. Let me moving over to a different camera angle here. This I know this little glove thing I'm wearing is pretty lame, but it's actually a compression sleeve. It's going up under the sleeve of my jacket or my shirt there. It's I have some struggle with my thumb from time to time, mainly just not from drawing, actually from using my mouse and scrolling on my phone. So I have moved over to a different compression glove, but I had this on for a little while because it kind of helps with my whole arm a bit. It looks kind of tacky and awful though. But I actually like to have some kind of drawing glove in general. I find that it helps me with not getting smudges and smears and spots on my hands. It's important to be careful. I have been struggling a little bit with that lately with working traditionally. It's something that you have to pay attention to. See here, this is a better camera angle, and you can see what I'm doing so much better. So, yes, so this is where I got my new camera mount. Although I wish I had kind of zoomed in a little bit more on some of this, but that's what we're learning, right? Figuring out how to do YouTube just as much as I'm figuring out how to do art. Man, these days, you got to be your own publicist and have a public persona, and know how to be a social media marketer, as well as spend all the time learning how to do art. It's kind of mind-boggling that anybody gets it done anymore, but it happens. You got to keep up with it. This is also a video to celebrate my 1,000th subscriber, which still sounds like baby numbers from a lot of folks, but I've gotten 1,000 subscribers in just over a month on 13 videos. I'm pretty happy about that, and I feel like this is making pretty good progress. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate you listening to me talk. I appreciate you connecting with what I am trying to do here, which is basically just learn to do something that I have always enjoyed and loved doing, and feel like I am getting better at as I go on. Man, I feel like his beard looks so weird now with no other shadow or light around it. That looks so much better once I get it filled in later, but it kind of looks heavy and just in this lighting. This was a great spot where I really loved some of the hatching he was doing here, and I tried to let some of the ink kind of do that little bit of blob thing, so it gave it a little of those sort of imprecise textures to make it feel a little, I don't want to say rough, because it is still intended to be tight, but to make it feel as though he is a weathered human being, or son of a god, or whatever. Yeah, you can tell I've moved to a different compression glove here. This is something I've gotten recently, and I kind of adore it. It pulls up around my thumb and keeps that whole area. In fact, it makes it harder for me to squeeze hard on my pens. So I feel like I get a lighter touch when I'm wearing it. I don't recommend everybody go out and buy a compression glove, but this thing really is comfortable for me, and it helps with comfort while I'm drawing. And if you can feel comfortable while you're drawing or you're doing work, you're going to do better and faster work. So I had to kind of interpret a little bit here on what I wanted to be whole black, and he had kind of had this all sectioned down to whole black, but I really thought it would be nice if it kind of faded into the red stripe across the shoulder, and it kind of, as we got closer out to the light, had a little more fade to it. So as we get to there, you'll see what I get to, but I also added a highlight over across where I thought the collarbone would be on the inside of the shadow, so we have a small highlight there. You'll see that in a moment too, but it's really the only alteration I made, because I wanted this deep black, but there was so few other places there was going to be a deep black that I was worried that if I didn't break it up a little, it would be heavy on the page, and too heavy on the eye. Still getting off screen a little bit here and there. Gonna have to work that out. So this pen nib holder I'm using, this is actually it was a little thing that I got it at like a hobby store. It had X-Acto knife blades in it, and it also had these embossing nibs that you could use for like leather embossing and I guess paper embossing, that kind of thing. But they were about the same size as a pen nib. And for like $9, I picked it up. It's plastic with a little like screw down Titan metal holder, but I put a little styrofoam, pen holder on it. I like it quite a bit. It's a little heavy on the top end. I was really trying to find one of those I think they're called griff holders or something like that. The stainless steel ones or aluminum ones. I was trying to find one of those, but that company has gone out of stock, and it's hard to find something like that. So this is a pretty nice alternative. It's not heavy, but it's not balanced the way I'd like for it to be. It's a little cheap. I don't know where I went. Probably went and grabbed a drink. Oh, no. changing tools. I had to fill in some blacks. All right, so this is where we spot some of these bigger blacks, and it's not just the really the one up here. I kind of worked from the top down in a lot of ways on a lot of this because didn't want to. I wanted the picture to come together. I think it's important sometimes to finish a whole section so that you can get the picture to come together as you're working on it. You can see how it's going to look or come together or feel. Yeah, so this is getting back to it the next day, I believe. I'm using this Japanese pen holder here that I actually ended up throwing away. It just wasn't sturdy enough to hold the tip in anymore. It was loose all the time. I didn't care for that, but I was using a piece of tape to hold it in place here. Used it, worked just fine, but felt like this thing was worn out. So this is where I started adding in some of my textures. And you can see that little white highlight just under the neck there. It was kind of meant to break up this big section of black and not have it just feel overpowering. It was where the light sort of faded under his shadow, but also came into that darker spot of red. I wanted it to give across, because we're going to be going at a horizontal angle on the highlighting for the red, so I wanted to kind of go across that to imply that same shadow, but not, I don't know, black it out. He pays a lot of attention to value in this shot and in the style of video he's doing. If you haven't checked out DrRocke, I highly recommend it. His videos are a lot of fun, and I kind of considered doing something a little in his style for making that appropriate, but to be honest, it's not my voice. I can't really do that. I thought about slamming some pens down on the table and doing kind of a kind of top-down sort of editorial confessional style talk before my thing and get everybody hyped up. But really, what I am hyped up about is being able to get the chance to do some of this work and look at this amazing rendering. And really just get a chance to work with somebody who gets lots of views on Instagram and YouTube. That's good for me and my channel. But also to get to work with somebody who has such a dedication to getting better at all times. It seems like since he has been posting these YouTube videos, there's just been this progression of better and better art as we move along. I kind of love that, and that's the sort of approach I want to take to my art. So why not work with people who do that? I do a lot of skateboarding, and I've done a lot of music, and the thing they'll always tell you in skateboarding is if you want to get better as a skater, skate with people who are better than you. If you want to get better as a musician, play with people who are better than you. The same is true with art. If you want to get better as an artist, work with people who are better than you, and that will always make you better. That being said, I mean, another reason I wanted to work with him is, let's face it, there's not a million people out there with a piece of DrRocke's work in their portfolio. You know, I get the opportunity to kind of have that and present that and say, hey, this is something I've done. This is an artist that I know a lot of people know, and I see him mentioned on YouTube a lot, and that's really cool. You know, it's a unique piece that I can have in my portfolio. And don't get me wrong, I love David Finch, but man, there's a million people out there inking David Finch, and I will do it too. I'll probably have a video up of it soon, to be honest. But the truth is, like, it's great to go out and find artists that are not your everyday household names as far as comic artists. Working with those people. The other great thing is, I even heard Rich Friend talking about this on his channel the other day. The other great thing about that, and I've kind of been digging and mining this idea for a little bit myself, is take new artists, people who are up and coming. Find pencilers that you really like, but they're just not quite there. And I don't mean that their work isn't there. I mean just somebody hasn't found them yet and his work isn't working with them. Because trust me, if that guy's good and he's producing good work, or that person's good and they're producing good work, someone's gonna find them. And if you become friends with that person and you can ink that person's work on the regular and people see those inks, you're a lot more likely to get somebody to speak to you about new work. Because let's face it, there's a million people out there inking David Finch. There's a million people out there who want to ink Dave Capullo. There's a million people out there. They got backups on backups on backups for those guys. So hopefully, if you can find a good artist who gets a gig, working for, let's say, I don't know, small time comics in Smallville, USA, but they're producing some work and they can produce really good work and you can produce stuff out of for a portfolio with that work. Well, then, man, you've got something unique. You might be able to pull two people into a community at once, or two people into the industry at once. Like, I mean, there's a lot more to it there. And I think working with people who are making their name is a lot more important than people who already have their name. Practice with those guys, learn from them, but man, try and work with new artists. We're all out here trying to get it, And this goes for pencilers too, man. Everybody's trying to learn to ink themselves, and that's wonderful. It's cool, man. It gives you full control, and to be honest, I understand it's what most companies want. But I highly recommend at least once or twice get somebody else to ink you. Get somebody who you think is a really good inker to ink you. You might be really surprised at what they see and can bring out in your work that you wouldn't have noticed. You might also have the opportunity to have somebody who can help you if you get in a pinch on a deadline and you now need to get something that you would normally get done yourself done, but you now can't for whatever reason, medical issue, whatever. You've now got somebody in your back pocket who you know is a good inker and you can do that. That's, man, cultivate that. I promise you it is something that you may need at some point in time in this industry. Okay, I'll stop pitching like why you would need an inker, but I promise you it's a good idea. This is where this piece started feeling like I was pretty sure that it was going to come together. I started doing these lines on that shoulder and then again on his head here, and I really started kind of understanding where the values were really going to work with the inks. This definitely gets all touched up and gone over quite a bit more over some time, but this part was a little hard for me because I didn't want to overwork my shadows and I really wanted to work that fade down into the ear without making it muddy looking or overworked looking. I feel like I got there, but it took a whole lot of patience in trying to make sure that I didn't. I think I even added a crosshatch here on the side because the way his lines were felt a little flat once I laid the inks on them, and I needed the head to feel round again in that area. So I think I added a little bit of an extra set of hatching lines there to kind of pull that shape in around. And you're not really close enough, and I could have zoomed in, but if you'll notice that I also added just a slight curvature to his line there so that it felt more like there was that round volume to the head. And it was nothing wrong with his line. It really had more to do with once you lay in that ink, it becomes much harsher. The black and the shadow becomes much harsher, and it feels like he's got a divot in his head if you don't really pay attention to that volume and the natural volume and form that the head would take. That's kind of just part of the process, right? Is sort of knowing and understanding. That's why it's not tracing. It's because you have to understand the form and the volume and the spaces and really kind of have the ability to make decisions and look at that and say, hey, this works really well, but there is also this, and this works really well, but maybe I should do it this way. because these are two different mediums. They present two different ways. So you put that black on there, it might look completely different than when you had it with the graphite. So, you have to kind of rethink it. Even if it's only slightly, you still sometimes have to just rethink it slightly to get yourself there. For example, once I got the beard inked in, there needed to be a slight halo highlight, or else I was going to lose those dark folds of the beard into the shadow underneath. And here's that full piece as it was finished. Before you guys get out of here, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for stopping by and listening to me yet again, and I hope to have more work up for you soon. Have a good night.